Hello, everybody. Welcome to this wonderful session of the Global Landscapes Forum Digital Conference. We'll now hear live from Douglas Rushkoff, one of the world's 10 most influential people named by MIT. He is an author of books, a podcast host for the US's National Public Radio, a visionary and a radical thinker on how the digital age is affecting the human species. His work explores how different technological environments change our relationship to narrative, money, power, and one another. Take a seat, like I have taken mine now, and join this conversation and what our lives in the digital world mean, and how this can shape our own narrative and in turn, the narrative of our life on this planet. Let's start off with Gabrielle, who will lead in this conversation. Hi, Gabrielle. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you so much for the kind introduction.
You're welcome. You've been doing amazing so far.
Thank you. I appreciate your kind words. My name is Gabrielle Lipton. I'm the editor of Landscape News for the Global Landscapes Forum. And welcome to this session, the second to last session of the storytelling track of this conference. Today, the storytelling track is focused on communication and storytelling in a digital age. So we heard from a producer of virtual reality from Al Jazeera earlier. And after, we're going to hear from a beautiful poet and artist about where the narrative in our story needs to go in the future. But right now we have the leading media theorist of our time with us to tell us a bit about where we are right now in the digital age. His name is Douglas Rushkoff. I'm so excited to talk to him. He's written numerous books and articles. As Daniel said, he hosts a podcast, and he really examines the digital ecosystem from all different angles, from how it affects indigenous peoples to how it drives consumerism and can create cults around brands. Terms like viral media and social currency are linked back to Douglas. So he's really getting into the details of what our online lives mean for us personally, and also what they mean for us collectively as a global village, a term that we'll probably get to later in this conversation. His podcast and his most recent book are both titled Team Human, and he's publishing the book serially on Medium, available for you to read, as well as you can order it hard copy online or find it in your bookstore. Those links are going to be dropped in the chat box, so you can check it out there. And welcome, Douglas. So great to have you.
Hi, good to be with you.
Great. So I'm going to start this conversation kind of right where we are. Due to COVID-19, also due to looking at things like emissions reductions, a lot more of our human interactions are going online. And they're happening, I've come to see, in quite granular ways, where people focused on specific topics, such as we are at this climate conference, coming together to talk about those in smaller groups. But the point of your book, Team Human, is that humans are collaborative, and to solve our pressing challenges, we really need to come together as a species. So how are you seeing this pandemic, and as we're all staying at home more and meeting online more, how are you seeing that affect the way that we're coming together in small and large groups?
I mean, in some ways, it's for the positive. I mean, I feel like the crisis has helped us see what the net is good for and what it's not good for. And I think people are increasingly having meetings that are stressing kind of their utility value. In other words, what is this meeting for? What are we here for? What do we want to accomplish? And how do I move on? You know, it's not, I'm doing this meeting just to feel good or just have a meeting or to connect with other people, because we're kind of not really connecting with other people online. You really can't do that for real. You know, to establish rapport with another person, you've got to be able to see their pupils getting larger or smaller as you talk. You see whether their breathing is syncing up to yours, whether the skin tone is changing. That these are, painstakingly evolved mechanisms for establishing social rapport that, we evolved over 500 or 800,000 years of being human. Those things don't work online. So the mirror neurons in my brain won't fire because I didn't get the cue. The oxytocin won't go through my blood. We won't get that bonding sense. And traditionally, when you're using the net wrong and you think, oh, I'm going to get this feeling of bonding with that person, and I'm going to see if they really agree with me, and if I can get that positive reinforcement, the person on the other side of the Skype call or the Zoom call, they said they agreed with me, but I didn't feel it in my body. And when you get off the phone, you don't say to yourself, oh, that's because I'm using a medium that doesn't allow for my mirror neurons to fire. Instinctually, you just say that person says they agreed with me, but I don't feel like they did. I don't trust them anymore. And it ends up eroding the relationships. But now I feel like now that we're under stress with COVID and in lockdown in so many places, we're using this. It's kind of like we're trying to orchestrate our world through a straw. Through a little digital straw. And we've experienced the frustration, but we also experience what can we actually do? All right, I can come up with marching orders. We can organize. We can do specific utilitarian things. But the experience of being online so much, at least for me, it reminds me of when I was a kid and my father caught me smoking cigarettes, and he took me out to the back and he made me smoke the whole pack of cigarettes, and I got so sick, right? So this thing that kind of used to be fun of the net, now that we're doing it so much, I feel like people are kind of nauseous of it. And they're looking for, that once this is done, I don't know how much we're going to want to use Zoom. People are saying, oh, we're going to use Zoom for everything after this. I'm thinking, I don't know. I think people are going to long for live contact again, live connection. But the beauty of it is that we are seeing what this is good for. People don't need to make an app for everything. When the way hospitals are getting their supplies from the public is with a simple Google Doc. They set up a spreadsheet. All the hospitals are listing. They're saying what supplies they need, where you can leave them. It's like, oh, you don't need an app for that. You just the things the net can do, it can already do so well. And I feel like we're getting really good at seeing how to use the tools we have rather than to try to make money inventing some new tool that nobody needs.
Mm-hmm. I think what you're saying feeds directly into consumerism and what we need with sustainability, which is downsizing and creating less and purchasing less. Are you saying that we need to downsize our digital ecosystem as well?
Oh, yeah. The digital ecosystem we have was not developed to serve people or places. The digital ecosystem we have was most of the things we use were invented to create exponential growth for a particular technology and by any means necessary. So they'll take the nastiest tools from behavioral finance. They have a whole division at Stanford called captology, which is how to make a tool, how to make a digital product addictive, how to make it so that a little girl will, re-swipe on her Snapchat to see if anybody else has come in, to do streaks and all these really psychological tricks to make people addicted to a piece of technology that doesn't serve humankind. It doesn't serve anything. But so if you take it all the way back to capitalism, which is not just the idea of trying to make money with money, but capitalism is really about serving the banks. It's about how do you make money by having money, period, not by creating value, not by exchanging value, but by extracting value from people and places and things. The people and places end up depleted. The topsoil is depleted by companies that the worst thing for Monsanto, say, would be regenerative soil management. What are they don't need us anymore. The best thing for Monsanto would be plants that are addicted to the drugs that they're putting on, or a topsoil that'll grow no food without, bioengineered insanity on it. So if each solution that people are coming up with is a solution geared to generating the most profit, then they're not going to be the things that are getting people offline, that are reconnecting people with their families. They're going to be the things that are keeping people online and addicting them to, increasingly brittle relationships to technology and business in the world.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to play devil's advocate a bit, though, because we are an environmental organization. And so for us, things like this conference are really important because they reduce emissions so much. And also in terms of inclusivity and diversity, we're seeing almost 5,000 people come in from across the world.
Right.
So how do we maintain those benefits while also downsizing? What good examples have you seen in all the myriad events you've been doing recently?
Yeah. I don't know that that's devil's advocate. I think we're agreeing, So what you're saying is then how can we, given what we know about the inability of people to establish great rapport over long distances using digital technology, how do we accomplish our mission without spending jet fuel and destroying the planet? Well, what you do is you understand that your mission is not about generating rapport between 4,000 people at one time. Your mission is about knowledge production and transmission, sharing best practices, that there's a utilitarian function to something like this that transcends the human to human function of this. And if people are really lonely, if they're lonely, this is not where to fill that. This is not where to fill your need for those relations. You're not going to meet the love of your life on the thing. At least you may, but you won't know it. But you can use this. You can at the end or at part of this see if you want to have regional meetings for people to find those in their area that are doing these practices that want to work together. Oh, if you're in, we have people in the top island of New Zealand. Why don't you go to this group, go to room 231, and people in the bottom half of New Zealand go to room 232, people in Madagascar go to room 234, and so on and so on. So you can find the others. You can do some matchmaking for local, but no, the only people that you're really going to be able to do the thing that we're talking about, the human to human connection with, are the other 120 people in your kind of what they call your Dunbar number of real relationships. And no, I mean, I can see you and you look nice. And I think we're having a slight bonding experience. I don't know if it's projection, but I feel like she's a sweet person doing this good thing. And that's great. And if we get to meet in real life at some point, then we get to be real humans together. But for now, we're using what we know about human connection to enact a relationship here, but for the purpose of transmitting knowledge to people who are out there. And that's, damn it, that's stimulating enough. It's just, you got to understand. So how are we going to be stimulated and fulfilled in these environments is with, and this is what digital does well, is with facts, with knowledge, with, this is not television. Television was great for making people emotional and telling stories and bringing them through things, and you project. Digital doesn't really do that. Digital is better for recall, for memory, and for work, for utilitarian stuff, for getting things done. And that's what we need more of, not less of. So I don't have a problem with us saying, look, we're going to do this thing online rather than killing the planet. We are going to share our best practices and stuff that we've done in the real world. We're going to then bring it here at a real specific time, share all this stuff, and then go back out and have our real relationships.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really interesting. But how do we spread that narrative of the digital space is one that we use for knowledge transmission and for the spread of hopefully not false information, but good information? How do you, when so many people are turning to the internet for human connection, people look to Instagram to connect with people. How do we pull those two things apart?
Well, in some ways, the COVID lockdown is helping to do that. I think people are starting to realize what they don't get out of this. They really long for. I mean, it's part of why I think we had such big protests in the US. Partly it was outrage. Partly it was the repression. People were so locked up that they needed, they needed to come out into the street and experience their corporeal, physical reality. Then that's the way we teach this, would be, it sounds so quaint. In school, even, in America, our schools, when they think about computers, they get so into STEM, we call it, science, tech, I forgot, engineering and mathematics, and teaching technology and media as kind of job skills. And I think what we need to do instead is teach media and technology as liberal arts, as, how do we think critically? We still don't teach liberal arts in America, or it's certainly diminished. But how do we think critically about the things that we're using? How do we understand, well, what do I want to use this platform for? And what does the company that makes this platform want to use this platform for? And they're two different things, right? They want to use it to do digital surveillance on me or to modify my behavior. I want to use it to connect with other people and share facts. And then you see which ones are good at this and which ones aren't. And you say, well, Facebook is not going to be really good for us to exchange information in this way, because Facebook has weird relationships with governments. It's already working to help repress certain kinds of social movements by you surrendering to whatever government it's working with, and all the data what it's using, and the way it's tracing people and identifying people for those who want to stop us from doing things. So it's like, okay, so that's not going to work for that. But other platforms that seem more trustworthy in their governance are also, they tend to be more open source and open API in their execution. So if we're teaching technology like that, which has more open standards, which is spying less, which is selling less of my data, in which of these platforms am I the genuine user rather than the used, that's the kind of critical thinking. And that was, a book I wrote in 2010 called Program or Be Programmed, was kind of arguing that, not that you need to become a programmer, but that if you're not the one aware of if you're not the one behind the programming of something, then chances are it's programming you. And that, I think, again, we're becoming more, and maybe the next generation is more intuitively aware of some of these factors, but we've got to become more, actually aware. I think we need to, speak out in the open about what platforms are working for us and which ones are we working for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's coming back to something you're talking about before with how we're biologically made as humans. And when we interact with someone, we see their pupils grow, we exchange pheromones. How do we maintain that? Where do you see the future of that going, when for many people, there's not so much of an end in sight for this pandemic, or the new normal is really going to exclude that? So how do we maintain that in our lives, us as part of nature?
Well, the new normal can't exclude that. It can't. If the new normal excludes that, then the transhumanists are right. If the new normal excludes human to human organismic contact, then the machines really can replace us at a certain point. Then we are just functioning cognitive, and we're just little brains, transmitting text and sound or whatever to each other. And we can teach our computers to do more and more of that until, then we are just, in some matrix and plugged in. But we end up, if we do that, we're going to end up losing all of the, I don't know if I'm even allowed to use these words anymore, but we're going to end up losing all of the innate indigenous knowledge that we desperately need to recover and recoup right now. There's a way an indigenous person sees and experiences the world, that where those who remember the knowledge of the first peoples, there's a way of seeing the cycles of you look at the moon and you understand what moon phase we're in, and intuitively understand that, oh, in this moon phase, my serotonin is going to be maximized. In that one, it's acetylcholine. In this one, it's dopamine. So, and no, indigenous people were not talking about dopamine, but they knew which phase of the moon to cut down the tree, which phase of the moon to party, which phase of the moon to start relationships, because they understood on a certain level, there's cycles to reality, to our world, whether we call them, circadian rhythms or biological clocks or time itself. And, as we as humans lose touch with that, I feel like we lose touch with the potential to reify the cyclic understanding of how the world works, and will surrender entirely to the linear understanding of how the world works. And the linear one, which we got, it's a media environment. We got linear time with the invention of text. Once we had text, once we could write things down, we got history, because we could write our story, and we got the future because we could write contracts. Once we started thinking of the world as history and now and the future, we looked at things in a linear way. How are we going to get there? When are we going to get the Messiah, coming and saving the world, and the apocalypse and the Armageddon and this? On some level, it was awful because of that stuff. On some level, it was great because we wanted to make next year better than this year and this year better than last year. But it's so dominated. We got this Western expansionary, growth-based, pedal to the metal, eyes on the prize, ends justifies the means, linear, Aristotelian, Western male orgasm narrative, climax and conquer and yay. And we know that kills us all, right? So we have to have a little bit of that so the boys feel motivated, right? Come on, go get that field. Come on, can you plow that field? Can you plant all these seeds today? Play with that, because they're going to have that urge no matter what, right? Boys think like that. But train them, put that inside the more circular thing. But we don't get the circular thing. We don't get the circular understandings of the world unless we are outside with each other. So no, COVID cannot be a new normal. Instead, what we have to do is to say, no, don't lock us up in digital devices. Instead, we have to look at what are the causes of COVID. The causes of COVID are an artificially global supply chain of industrial food and agriculture. We fish for shrimp in the Gulf of Mexico. We ship them all the way to Vietnam and China to be shelled, and ship them all the way back to the United States to be consumed. That's not efficient. It's cheaper in the short run, but more expensive in the long term. And that's the problem with capitalism, the way we're exercising it. That's a problem of not actually understanding the larger cycles, or not being allowed to acknowledge them because we want short-term profit rather than long-term prosperity.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back to what you were saying about getting back in touch with the innate humanity in all of us and the indigenous knowledge and teachings that we, like Aboriginal tribes in Australia, I know many of them, they're able to just innately know which way is north, south, east, and west. They don't need to see the sun or the stars, they just feel it. How do we get back in touch with that? And I've seen that you've done some work about, or had some podcasts about indigenous peoples. And in some ways, technology can really bring their voices and their stories and their knowledge to the forefront. So what's the balance? How do we use technology to reinvigorate that innate humanity?
We use technology to get the data points, the exercises, the thing. So, you can read a book by an indigenous scholar online, or you can order a book by an indigenous scholar and get it on your Kindle, but then go out into the world and see the woods where you are. And it's hard, but when I walk around the woods where I am in the Northeast, I'm aware now that, the reason I felt strange in these woods is because they're dead. You can feel it. You can know, because on some level, I instinctually know I'm not supposed to be able to see that far in the woods because I'm just seeing the little trunks of trees. There's no flora. There's no small growth. It's gone. Why is that? I can see that these trees I can hear the trees falling every time I walk in the woods because they were all planted at the same time. And now they're all going to fall at the same time. So the digital is there to help give me the information really that I need to then go out in the world and experience it in this other way. It's not the way we experience the world. It might be a good metaphor for collective knowledge. I always argued in the early 90s that the internet would not create a global brain, but it would be a great way to experience an imitation of a global brain. This is what it would be like if we all saw each other's thoughts, if we were all in the same headspace together. But it's not real. It's a simulation of that. But then you can go out in the world and start to experience that organismic sensibility. And the more you do that, I mean, the obstacle to it for me is the pain. It's the anguish. It's the mourning. Because I go out in the world and to experience it like that, you start to see, oh my gosh, look at what we just paved over here. Or look at the way this farm is using these horrible caterpillar, destroying the soil matrix and treating the soil as if it were dirt and not knowing, and then pouring chemicals on it to imitate what the soil matrix or what the fungi would have done for the plants. When you go out and, I mean, all these people probably experienced it long before I did, but as a regular human, when I go out and see that for the first time, wow, it's the morning. So then come back to the digital space, have a group of a few hundred people and work through, oh my gosh, my heart is so, I'm in mourning for what we've done. And people, yeah, I feel that too. But what can we do now? And how do we, all right, let's breathe a second and talk about, what are some coping strategies? And the digital is great for that. And then go back out in the real world.
Mm-hmm. We have just a couple minutes left. So I want to end on kind of a grander point. It's the sign behind you. It's the name of your book and your podcast, Team Human. Could you briefly say what Team Human is and what your hopes are if we can build a team human to tackle things like climate change, like pandemics, like riots in the streets? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, Team Human is really just a phrase I'm using to help people remember that being human is a team sport. That, we live, certainly in America, we live in a world of strident individualism. And we're told that success is when you've earned enough money to insulate yourself from the rest of the world, to insulate yourself from the reality that you're creating by earning money in that way, so you get your billionaire bunker, you get to be Elon Musk and you've got a rocket ship to get off the planet and leave us behind. And that's the saddest existence of all. The venture capitalists and libertarians have misinterpreted, and I think cynically, they've misinterpreted evolution and Darwin to say that we live in a world with the survival of the fittest individual. And that's not what evolution is about. If you actually read your Darwin, you'll see what he's doing, what he's marveling at, page after page after page, is the ability of species to collaborate and cooperate with one another for mutual survival. We all know, well, you all know that, trees are not individual plants, that trees communicate through the soil matrix, that they're not competing for sunlight. The ones that are getting sun are sharing their nutrients through the mushrooms and mycelia with the ones that aren't getting the sun. And then when they lose their leaves, the little ones then give the nutrients back to the big ones, and the mushrooms get a service fee for the transaction. So they're all one thing. So you can't just have a tree. Tree is part of this an organism, and humans are the same way. There's no such thing as an individual. We are part of the same big nervous system. Stress is not yours. Stress goes out, whether you want to talk about it through pheromones. If you find some scientific cause and effect, great, but it's just one of many of the ways that we experience each other together. So what I'm arguing is that anything that brings us together is kind of on the side of Team Human. And the internet was in some ways supposed to do that. But anything that separates us and atomizes us and alienates us from one another, the way social media does now, where you find your silo and then hate the other side, or in America, the way digital media has really exacerbated the red state, blue state, Trump state, normal state divide. Sorry, I'm obviously on one side of that divide. is a big problem. So if you want to be on Team Human, the idea is, how do you actually see the human being under the person wearing the Make America Great Again hat? How do they see the human being in us and realize that we have so much in common as humans, that these ideologies that have been used to separate us and divide us are really just ways of keeping the powerful in power, of keeping us fighting each other, keeping middle-class cops fighting middle-class Black people, and realizing, oh, wait a minute, we're the working class, and it's them that are leading us to believe that we're on opposite sides.
Mm. That's a beautiful message. Thank you so much for sharing it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It was such a pleasure to talk to you, and I learned so much.
Oh, it's an honor to speak to you. You guys are the ones who are actually, I mean, land. I read that we only have 30 harvests left if we don't start our land management differently. So please, get this out to the world and teach us as a world, get public information out. What can we do as regular people in our behaviors to support those who are doing regenerative land management and who are understanding that we need more than one species of plant in the same place at the same time for everything to be healthy?
Yeah, it's a symbiotic process. We need the brains like you and the scientists. We need everyone. So
Great. Well, thanks for what you do.
thank you, Douglas, and thanks for your time.
Okay, be good.
All right.